They looked too perfect to be trouble. 3 identical girls in pressed white collars, dragging matching Navy suitcases through Gate 19, like a line of miniature diplomats. But what happened next wasn't a misunderstanding. It was the kind of story that makes you stare at the screen, hold your breath, and wonder how adults forget what dignity looks like. This isn't one of those revenge stories. It's quieter than that. And somehow, that makes it hurt more. The airport at Incheon was awake, but still sleepy, bathed in that pale 6 a.m. light that turns metal cold and glass almost silver. Announcements echoed lazily over the PA. A janitor polished the corner of a window until he could see his reflection. The world was moving, but gently. Chloe Han, the oldest of the triplets by 11 minutes, held her sister's passports in one hand and the boarding passes in the other. "Keep your hands inside your coats," she whispered. "Dad says never lose your travel documents." Celine nodded like a soldier in miniature, chin up, eyes scanning. Clara just hummed quietly, the hem of her sweater brushing against her knees. They were 9, identical down to the tilt of their chins and the freckle under the right eye. 3 little mirrors reflecting the same calm. Their seats were in first class, row 1A through 1C. Tickets gifted by the Future Wings Foundation, an education program for children of public servants. To everyone watching, they might have looked like daughters of some diplomat. In truth, they were flying under anonymity orders. Their father, Minister Han, was traveling separately for an aviation summit in Singapore. The girls weren't supposed to attract attention. "Remember," Aunt Jiun had said before leaving them at security, her phone pressed to her ear. "You are not important passengers. You're just travelers. Be kind. Be quiet." They were always quiet. That's what people noticed most about the Han triplets. They didn't fidget, didn't interrupt, didn't demand. When adults spoke to them, they listened. When no one did, they listened anyway. Now, as they sat in the VIP lounge, the soft rustle of newspapers and espresso machines filling the air, Chloe studied the clock on the wall. 6:37 a.m., boarding in 23 minutes. She traced the numbers with her thumb, the way her father did when thinking through a decision. Across from them, a man in a charcoal suit glanced at the girls over the rim of his tablet. His expression was kind but puzzled. 3 children alone in a lounge meant for executives and foreign diplomats. He seemed to want to ask if they were lost, but didn't. People rarely did. Celine reached for the plate of shortbread cookies on the table and hesitated. "Do we pay for these?" she asked. Chloe shook her head. "No, they're included." "Everything's included for them," Clara murmured. "For who?" Celine asked. "The people who belong here." The words hung in the air longer than they should have. By 6:55, the lounge had begun to clear. The triplets gathered their things, adjusting their coats, straightening their skirts like tiny cadets. Their matching backpacks bore the small embroidered emblem of the Horizon Youth Program, a silver wing wrapped around a globe. They joined the short line at Gate 19, marked First Class, Priority Boarding. It felt like stepping into sunlight after being in shade. The people in front wore suits that whispered when they moved. Perfume drifted like invisible fences. The triplets stood at the end of the line, quiet, hands clasped. That's when she saw them. Paige Rutherford, senior flight attendant 39, hair pulled into a perfect blonde knot that looked sharp enough to cut paper. Her uniform was immaculate, every fold in its place, her badge gleaming with the golden letters Zenith Jet Executive Crew. Paige was the kind of person who carried authority like perfume. You smelled it before you saw it. Years of first-class service had trained her to recognize the real passengers. The polished, the wealthy, the ones who fit. When her gaze landed on the triplets, her lips curved, but not in kindness. She approached, clipboard in hand. "Sweethearts," she began, her voice smooth as stainless steel. "This line is for first-class passengers." Chloe lifted her chin. "Yes, ma'am. We're in 1A, 1B, and 1C. Paige blinked, surprised at the confidence, then extended her hand. "Let me see your boarding passes." Chloe handed them over carefully, both hands. Paige looked at the paper, real, official, with holographic print, and frowned anyway. "Who booked these?" she asked. "Our aunt," Chloe replied. "She works for the—" "For the what?" Paige interrupted, scanning the tickets again, then glancing at the girls' coats, at the modest duffel bags. No designer luggage. No parents in sight. "I see. So, no adults traveling with you?" Clara's voice was small. "She's waiting for us in Singapore." Paige tilted her head. "Right. And I'm the Queen of England." A few people in line chuckled softly, not loud enough to be cruel, but loud enough for the girls to hear. Chloe's cheeks flushed. She looked down, her voice shrinking. "We're allowed to be here, ma'am." Paige leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "Listen, sweetheart. Sometimes people make mistakes on bookings. Why don't you step aside until I verify this?" Her tone was syrup, but the kind that coats a knife. Celine's eyes filled with tears she refused to let fall. Clara clutched her backpack like armor. Chloe just nodded once and said, "Yes, ma'am." They stepped aside. Behind them, the world continued boarding, indifferent. Suitcases rolled, heels clicked. The intercom called another flight. The girls stood by the window, framed against the gray morning. Outside, a Zenith jet aircraft idled on the tarmac, its logo catching the rising light like a blade. Celine whispered, "Do you think she'll let us on?" Chloe didn't answer right away. She was watching Paige, who now smiled brightly as she welcomed an older man in a tailored suit, bowing slightly as she handed him a glass of champagne. "Maybe," Chloe said finally. "Maybe not." And though she didn't know it yet, that was the moment everything began to tilt. The calm before the fracture, the silence before the system itself decided it had seen enough. The boarding gate buzzed with that quiet kind of urgency that always follows the words, "Final call." The metallic hum of suitcase wheels mixed with the steady voice of the PA system, calling out names that would never quite make it in time. Chloe, Han held her sister's hands tighter as the first-class passengers began to board. The girls stepped forward cautiously, the line moving like a slow, elegant current of pressed suits, pearl earrings, and passports in leather covers. The smell of espresso and jet fuel tangled in the air. Paige Rutherford, the senior flight attendant, stood by the gate desk. Her posture was perfect, her smile precise, her eyes sharp enough to slice through pretense. She'd been in this industry for 17 years. She'd seen every type of passenger, the real ones who belonged, and the pretenders who didn't. To Paige, spotting the difference was an art form. The real ones carried their confidence like a fragrance. The others tried too hard. When she saw the three girls again, small, identical, holding hands at the end of the first-class line, something in her gut twisted. "Sweethearts," she said, lowering her clipboard. "You're still here?" Chloe nodded, polite. "Yes, ma'am." "You said you were checking our tickets." Paige's smile stayed, but the warmth in it had gone missing. "And you're sure these seats are correct?" "Yes, ma'am. 1A, 1B, and 1C. People in line began to glance over, mildly curious. There was something off about three little girls standing in a space meant for business travelers and CEOs. A man in a designer jacket muttered, "What's going on?" Paige turned toward the girls again, voice lower now. "You don't have parents traveling with you?" "Our aunt is meeting us in Singapore," Celine said softly. "Oh," Paige said, her tone almost mocking. "How convenient." She took a step closer, her heels clicking against the polished floor. "You see, this section is for first class, not—" She paused, eyes flicking over their modest coats, "children on field trips." The people in line chuckled quietly. The kind of laughter that cuts twice. The first time when you hear it, the second when you realize no one stopped it. Chloe felt her throat tighten. "We're not on a field trip, ma'am. We're going to—" "I'm sure you are," Paige interrupted, snapping her fingers toward the gate agent. "Let's get this cleared up before these little actresses delay my flight." The gate agent, a young man who'd clearly been trained to follow orders, looked uncertain. "Their tickets are valid, Ms. Rutherford." Paige didn't even look at him. "Check again." Sometimes the system prints upgrades when it shouldn't. She crouched slightly, eye level with the girls. Her smile returned, sharp, sugar-coated, mean. Listen, I've been doing this for a long time. I know who belongs up there and who doesn't. You don't have to pretend. Celine's eyes shimmered, her small hands trembling as she clutched the boarding pass. We're not pretending. Paige snatched the tickets from her hands, scanned them with her badge scanner, and frowned when the green light confirmed authenticity. It annoyed her more than if it hadn't worked. She said, holding the tickets up to the light like they were counterfeit bills. Maybe someone pulled a favor for you. Still, I'll need to see identification. Chloe reached into her coat pocket and handed over the passports. The Navy covers bore the Republic of Korea emblem, their names written neatly inside. Paige flipped through them too fast, then closed them with a sigh. Where's your guardian? She demanded. She had to take a call, Chloe said carefully. Uh-huh. Paige straightened, raising her voice just enough for the nearby passengers to hear. So, no adult, no guardian, and yet 3 seats in first class. You can understand why that seems suspicious. The crowd's energy shifted. Not quite hostile, but detached. The kind of silence that lets humiliation grow legs. Clara stepped back until her shoulder touched the glass wall. Her reflection looked smaller than she remembered. Please, Celine whispered. We didn't do anything wrong. Paige's tone hardened. You don't belong in that cabin. Step aside. The words step aside hit harder than they should have. It wasn't a shout, but the authority in it left no room for error. The girls moved toward the wall obediently, their eyes down. Behind the gate counter, the agent opened his mouth to object, then closed it again. He needed this job. Chloe felt the stares pressing against her like heat. Someone behind her sighed loudly. Someone else muttered, "Just let the woman do her job." She looked at Paige again, her pulse pounding. "Ma'am," she said quietly, "our tickets are real. You can call the—" Paige's hand sliced through the air. "Enough." She turned her head sharply toward the gate agent. "Cancel these seats and put them on standby." The agent froze. "But, Ms. Rutherford—" Paige didn't even look back. "Do it!" The intercom crackled overhead. "First-class passengers for Zenith Jet Flight 212, final boarding." Chloe's chest tightened. The girls' luggage sat neatly by their feet, tags already printed, names perfectly aligned. They'd followed every rule, every instruction. They had done nothing wrong. Still, in that moment, they became invisible. Paige smiled to herself, satisfied, as she began greeting the next passengers. Real ones, she thought. The kind who carried themselves like currency. When the last of the suits had walked past, Paige turned back to the girls. "You can wait over there," she said, pointing to a plastic bench near the economy gate. "I'll let you know when the captain approves your downgrade." She walked away, leaving the smell of perfume and authority behind her. Celine's voice cracked. "She hates us." Chloe shook her head slowly. "No," she whispered. "She doesn't even see us." Through the window, the morning light had grown brighter, but colder too. The Zenith Jet logo gleamed on the plane's silver body, a perfect mirror for everything wrong with the world that morning. And somewhere, in the quiet corner of the gate, the smallest sound broke the stillness. The faint electronic beep from a metal tag deep inside Chloe's bag, one that hadn't been touched. It blinked once, then went dark. No one noticed. Not yet. But 5 minutes later, the sky would. The last of the first-class passengers drifted down the jet bridge, the kind of people whose shoes didn't squeak and whose watches knew what time it was in 3 cities at once. The gate printer spat a final boarding list like a sigh. The PA voice softened into background air. Chloe kept her sisters close, their coat sleeves touching, their luggage lined up the way their father taught them at home. Wheels in, handles down, names facing out. When the line cleared, Paige Rutherford returned. Her smile stretched thin as if someone had pulled it tight and tied a knot behind her ears. "All right," she said brightly, as if speaking to a classroom. Now that the important passengers are on board, let's tidy up this little misunderstanding. She held their 3 boarding passes between 2 fingers, flipping them like she was shuffling small, unworthy things. The scanner light had turned green earlier, but she'd decided that didn't matter. Authority, to Paige, wasn't about what the system said. It was about what she decided. "Please," Chloe said, choosing her words the careful way she always did. "We followed every instruction." "If you call—" "Enough!" Paige snapped, and the words slipped through the quiet like a blade. She looked at the gate agent. "Stand by. Reissue an economy, or bump to the next flight." The agent's eyes flickered. He didn't agree, but he also didn't belong to himself while he wore that jacket. He adjusted his tie instead. Clara tried to breathe slower, the way Aunt Ji-un taught them. In through the nose, out through the mouth. Count to 4. Steady your hands. Her fingers still shook. She reached down to lift her duffel, but the strap had twisted itself into a knot. She knelt to fix it. "Up," Paige said, the word flat. "You don't kneel in a priority lane." Clara rose too fast and bumped the gate stanchion. The velvet rope shivered. Someone farther back laughed under his breath, the kind of laugh that isn't meant to be heard but is always heard anyway. Celine edged behind Chloe, eyes shining in a way she didn't let become tears. "We're not trying to make trouble," she whispered. "We just want to sit where our tickets say." "And I want a quiet boarding," Paige replied, "which I'm not getting." She lifted the girls' passports again without care, cracking the stiff covers, bending them backward. "Where's your guardian? On a call is not a guardian." "We're meeting her at the gate in Singapore," Chloe said. "Children," Paige said, voice slow, rehearsed, while she tucked the passports against her clipboard. "First class isn't a parade. It isn't a photo op. It is a premium cabin. Premium. Do you know what the word means?" Chloe's throat worked once. "Yes, ma'am." "Good. Then step aside." Paige angled her body, guiding them toward the plastic benches by the economy lane. The ones with the peeling armrests and the gum stain no one could quite get off. They didn't move. It wasn't defiance. It was something simpler than that. 3 small feet not remembering how to walk in a place that had just told them they didn't belong. Paige frowned, tilted her head like a metronome clicking toward impatience. She reached out, not for a hand, not for a suitcase, but for Chloe's boarding pass, pinched at the corner, tugging. "Please don't," Chloe said softly, fingers tightening. Paige tugged harder. The paper ripped. The sound was thin, almost silly, but it went through the girls like a cold wind. Chloe looked down at the torn corner in her hand, then up at Paige, trying to find a polite word for disbelief and failing to find any word at all. "What did I say?" Paige murmured, the kind of softness that comes before thunder. "Step aside." Celine's grip on Chloe's sleeve loosened. She reached to rescue the rest of the pass, and in that overlap of hands and impatience, Paige's palm flashed forward. The slap landed flat across Celine's cheek. Clean, practiced. A motion that had nothing to do with losing control and everything to do with asserting it. The sound was not loud, not really, but the terminal seemed to inhale and hold it. Metal, glass, carpet, people. Everything drew the moment in and would not let it out. Celine stumbled half a step. She didn't fall. She didn't cry. She put her hand on the nearest thing, the stanchion post, and the world steadied 1 inch at a time. Paige's face did not change. "I said," she repeated, "step aside." Clara's breath hitched, a small animal sound she swallowed before anyone could hear. She moved in front of Celine without knowing she'd moved at all, as if her body had its own rule book and page 1 said, "Protect your sister." Chloe lifted her chin, not high, just enough to keep her voice from scraping. "You can't." The second slap clipped Chloe's jaw, a sideways snap that turned her face where Paige wanted it to face. Away. The neat twist of Chloe's ponytail shifted, ribbon sliding a 1/4 inch. She steadied herself with the handle of her suitcase, fingers white around the plastic. A businessman in a navy suit said, "Hey," and then remembered his calendar and closed his mouth. A woman with a pearl clip fumbled her phone and didn't quite press record. "Stop," Clara said. It was not a shout. It was the softest word in the language, said with everything inside it. Paige pivoted to her, eyes narrowed, mouth a straight rule. "You're interfering with boarding." Clara took a step back. Paige took a step forward. The third slap was the smallest and somehow the worst. Small because Clara was small, because the palm stopped just short of full force, because even cruelty has a scale. Worst because by then everyone knew what was happening and still nothing moved to stop it. The humiliation landed where the hand did, and it stuck. Silence grew roots. The gate agent's fingers hovered over the keyboard. 10 small statues. A security guard near the wall looked at the floor tiles as if they had instructions printed on them, and he'd forgotten his glasses. The PA called for a connecting flight in a different hall, a human voice somewhere else doing its job. Paige brushed at her sleeve, as if dust might have landed there. "There we are," she said, collecting the torn boarding passes into a tidy stack. "You've delayed enough people for one morning." She turned to the jet bridge and said to no one in particular, "Door can close." The automatic doors whirred. The jet bridge light shifted from steady white to the pale yellow that means almost gone. Chloe reached down, lifted the piece of paper still in her hand, the torn corner with the hologram. She set it carefully on top of the suitcase. Then she picked up the strap that had twisted earlier and righted it. "Order first," her father always said, "then action." She looked at Celine. The cheek was flushing slowly, a warm handprint of somebody else's certainty. Celine nodded once. "I'm here." Chloe looked at Clara. Her eyes were bright as winter. Clara nodded. "I'm here too." Chloe slid her hand into the side pocket of her backpack, feeling for the small metal tag she wasn't supposed to need. It was cool, the way coins are cool in the morning. Her thumb found the engraved wing and pressed, out of habit more than hope. Nothing lit. The tag had been deactivated months ago. She knew that. She closed her hand around it anyway. Not to use it, but to remember what it had meant when it worked. You are not invisible. "Please," Chloe said to the air. To no one. To everyone. Not a plea to be let on. Not anymore. A plea for someone to see. No one answered. Not Paige, who had already turned away. Not the agent, who had already learned how to make himself smaller inside a uniform. Not the passengers, who had already chosen the flight over the moment. But somewhere beyond the glass, beyond the jet bridge and the wing and the painted lines and the cones, the morning shifted. A camera above the gate, one of 100 eyes that never blink, watched a frame that crossed a line it had been taught to recognize. The algorithm that lived in that eye did what it was written to do when it saw a protected minor struck. It did not call for a supervisor. It did not ask a question. It reached for a cord that humans had tied around the sky and gave it the gentlest pull. A single tone murmured through the ceiling, so soft it could be mistaken for air conditioning. The boarding screen blinked. The status bar flickered. Not off, not on, but thinking. Paige didn't notice. She smoothed her hair, lifted her shoulders, and walked toward the jet bridge with the satisfied step of someone who believes the world is exactly as she says it is. Chloe let go of the tag. She took her sister's hands again. "We're okay," she said, and felt the words ring truer than the situation deserved. Behind them, the automatic door hesitated. The light above the gate shifted to red. A message crawled across the screen in a language that didn't ask permission. Horizon Ethics Trigger Hold. The terminal didn't gasp. It simply stopped, as if the building itself had remembered something it had promised long ago. And in that held breath, the slap finally echoed, out of cheeks and paper and silence, into systems. The terminal didn't move for a full 10 seconds. Then the usual sounds. The rolling of bags, the click of heels. Started again, just a little offbeat, like a song that had lost its rhythm. Paige Rutherford didn't look back. She was already halfway down the jet bridge, straightening her collar, rehearsing the line she'd use if anyone asked why 3 unaccompanied minors had been denied boarding. Safety protocol, she'd say. Miscommunication. The kind of phrase that cushions guilt until it feels like procedure. At the gate, the 3 girls stood by themselves. Their reflections shimmered on the tall glass window. 3 small silhouettes against the vast silver of the waiting plane. Outside, the light had turned hard and white, like the morning no longer wanted to be gentle. Chloe reached into her backpack. Inside, under the neatly folded sweater her aunt had packed, lay the object she wasn't supposed to touch, an oval piece of brushed steel, the size of her palm. It looked harmless, a commemorative badge from the Horizon Youth Program. But it wasn't just a souvenir. She'd found it again 2 weeks ago, tucked in a drawer, the day she overheard her father talking on the phone. He'd mentioned deactivations, ethics upgrades, and retraining delays. She hadn't understood all of it, but she remembered one thing he said to whoever was on the line. "We built this system so the smallest voice couldn't be erased. Not again." Now, in the silence of Gate 19, that line came back to her. She turned the badge over in her hands, her thumb tracing the faint engraving of a wing and the word Horizon. Celine noticed. "Chloe, don't," she whispered. "Dad said it doesn't work anymore." "I know," Chloe answered softly. "But maybe it remembers." Clara's eyes flicked toward the ceiling, to the black domes of the security cameras. "Someone saw, right? It was on camera." Chloe didn't answer. She pressed her thumb to the badge's center. Nothing happened. No light, no sound, just cool metal. Paige's laughter drifted faintly from the jet bridge. She was greeting another passenger now, her tone suddenly melodic again. That voice people liked, the professional one, polished and full of empty comfort. The badge stayed dark. Chloe exhaled, the breath shivering. "It's dead." She dropped it back into her bag, but as she zipped the pocket, she thought she saw something, a blink, a bare flicker like a machine thinking about waking up. It went dark again before she could be sure. At the far end of the concourse, a maintenance worker pushed his cart past an emergency access panel. Hidden behind the metal grill was a fiber optic hub feeding the building's internal network. A tiny diode blinked once, green, then amber, then red. Inside a server closet 3 floors below, an algorithm wrote a single line into the security log. Ethics pattern deviation, potential child abuse, protected minor. No one saw it, no human, anyway. Back upstairs, Celine tugged her sister's sleeve. "Can we call Aunt G on?" Chloe shook her head. "She's in the meeting. Remember what she said? No calls unless it's emergency," Clara finished. Her voice was small. "Isn't this one?" Before Chloe could answer, the gate agent's headset crackled. He turned slightly, listening. "Yes, this is Gate 19, he said quietly. "Uh-huh. No, everything's fine. Just a delay on final clearance." His eyes slid to the girls, then away again. "Copy that." He hung up, wiped his forehead, and reopened the boarding gate on his screen. But the system froze. The cursor spun. A message appeared. "Horizon Protocol. Admin lock, awaiting verification." He blinked. "What the?" The boarding display flickered, the flight status turning from boarding closed to hold. Passengers waiting nearby glanced up. "Another delay?" someone muttered. "Technical issue," the agent murmured automatically. The universal lie of airports. 5 miles across the city, in a secure floor of the Asia-Pacific Aviation Command Center, an analyst looked up from her coffee as her monitor lit with a new code. Horizon 9A. Ethics trigger detected. "What the hell is that?" her colleague asked. She scrolled, frowning. "That tag's been inactive since March. So it's a bug? Maybe. But look, it's tied to the Han family security registry." Her colleague's chair creaked. "As in Minister Han?" She didn't answer. Instead, she keyed the intercom. "Director Ji-un, we might have a false activation, or not so false." Gate 19, Incheon International. Zenith Jet Flight 212. There was a pause. Then a voice over the speaker, low, steady. The kind of calm that only came from someone who had trained for crises and hoped never to see them. Confirm visual feed. Uploading now. On the screen they saw it. 3 children standing alone at the gate. One rubbed her cheek. Another clutched a duffel strap with both hands. The third, Chloe, looked directly at the camera, as if she knew it was there. "Oh my God," someone whispered. "Director?" Lock down the flight. Quietly. No public alert yet. Activate Level 1 containment. Under what authority? Under mine. Back at Gate 19, the badge inside Chloe's backpack pulsed once, dim, then steady, like a heartbeat. She didn't see it, but she felt something shift in the air, a pressure change, a sudden stillness that wasn't silence but listening. Paige reemerged from the jet bridge, frustrated. "Why haven't we pushed back yet?" she asked the gate agent. He shrugged helplessly. "System's locked. Says something about an ethics hold." Paige laughed, incredulous. "Ethics hold? That's not a thing." But as she said it, the lights above the gate dimmed. The hum of the conveyor belt slowed, then stopped. A soft tone chimed through the speakers. 3 notes rising, 1 falling. The air conditioning fans paused. Even the flight monitors across the terminal blinked simultaneously, switching to a gray screen. Passengers looked around. Phones buzzed with notifications that no one understood. Paige's voice cracked a little. "What's happening?" Chloe looked up at her. Her tone wasn't angry. It wasn't loud. It was something older than either of those. "It's not us," she said quietly. "It's the sky." Paige frowned, about to answer, but the intercom beat her to it. "Attention! Horizon protocol activated. All Zenith jet flights suspended pending review." The words dropped into the air like stones into water, ripples spreading outward. First confusion, then fear, then something close to awe. The gate agent's headset crackled again. He listened, then looked at the girls, pale. "Ma'am," he said to Paige, "we've been ordered to stand down. The airline's under ethics audit." Paige stared at him, then at the children, then back at the dark window where the plane waited. Engines quiet. "Who did this?" she whispered. No one answered. Far above them, satellites adjusted their telemetry, redirecting feeds towards 7 countries. Data packets moved faster than apologies ever could. Down at Gate 19, Chloe closed her backpack gently, her thumb resting on the seam of the zipper. The badge inside glowed one last time before going dark again. Its job done. She didn't smile. She just stood a little straighter, the way her brother used to when called to attention. For the first time that morning, the 3 sisters didn't look small. They looked seen. The lights in the terminal hadn't gone out. They'd simply shifted. What used to be white had turned the faint color of ash, like the airport itself was holding its breath. Paige Rutherford stood frozen in the middle of Gate 19, a boarding manifest still in her hand. "It's just a glitch," she said out loud, mostly to convince herself. "Someone tripped a breaker." No one answered. Behind her, the gate agent's screen displayed a single blinking message. "System hold. Ethics protocol initiated." He tried typing again. Nothing. The keyboard didn't respond. The boarding scanner light, usually green, was pulsing red, slow and deliberate. Passengers shifted uneasily. Phones buzzed with alerts from airline apps. Flight suspended. Await further instruction. Nobody knew what ethics protocol meant, but it didn't sound like weather or maintenance. It sounded personal. At the center of the gate, the 3 sisters stood together. Celine pressed her palm to her cheek where Paige's handprint still burned faintly pink. Clara clutched the handle of her small duffel so tightly the fabric creaked. Chloe stood between them, perfectly still, like someone listening for a sound no one else could hear. "Chloe," Clara whispered, "did you do something?" Chloe shook her head slowly. "No, not me." Her bag was zipped, the badge inside hidden from view, but something about the air felt charged, like the moment before thunder. Page exhaled sharply and turned to the gate agent. "Call maintenance. Tell them to reboot the terminal." He shook his head. "It's not local. Look." He pointed toward the flight display above them. Every other Zenith jet flight code on the board had grayed out. Departures suspended, awaiting clearance. Page's lips parted. "That can't be right. It's network-wide," the agent said. "All connected hubs, 5 miles away, in the glass tower of the Asia-Pacific Aviation Command Center." Analysts stared at their monitors as red pins lit up across the map. "Gate 19 was first," said the technician at the console. "Now the cascades hit Osaka, Manila, Sydney, and Seoul terminals, all Zenith jet routes locked out of federal airspace." A woman in a dark blazer crossed her arms. "Who authorized the Horizon Protocol?" "Unknown," the technician said. "There's no operator signature. It's autonomous. Impossible. That system requires dual verification." "Ma'am," he said quietly, "it verified itself." For a long moment, no one spoke. Then the woman murmured, "The AI watchdog reactivated." She tapped her earpiece. "Get me Minister Han. Tell him the sky just intervened." At the terminal, Page's confidence began to unravel. She tugged at her collar, scanning the crowd for some official explanation she could use later. Something that didn't sound like superstition. "This isn't me," she told the passengers nearby. "The system's just confused." But her voice trembled on the last word. Celine looked up at her with eyes too calm for 9 years old. "Sometimes systems wake up when people forget how to act right." Page blinked, thrown by the poise in the child's tone. "Excuse me?" Chloe's voice was soft. "You said we didn't belong. Maybe the sky disagreed." That was when every phone in the gate chimed at once. Screens lit up with an emergency ticker. Notice: Horizon Ethics Alert. Passenger dignity violation under review affected flights. Zenith Jet 01ZX212, Gate 19 and related routes. Whispers spread like static. "What's a dignity violation? Is this real? Who are those kids?" Page took a step back. The gate agent tried to calm the crowd, but even he was whispering now. Across the ocean, in the control room of Horizon Defense Analytics, a young specialist stared at the stream of data. "It's not just shutting flights," she said. "It's logging video evidence." "Of what?" her supervisor asked. She turned the monitor toward him. "Gate 19, Incheon, 3 minors, 1 crew member, pattern match, physical aggression against protected dependents." He leaned closer. "Protected dependents? You mean those badges?" "Yes, sir. The Horizon badges. Someone tried to revoke the program last quarter. Guess it didn't forget how to work." Back at Gate 19, the hum of the building deepened, as if something vast and invisible was thinking. Chloe's backpack shifted slightly where it hung on her shoulder. A faint glow seeped through the zipper seam, blue, then white, like light under deep water. Clara saw it first. "Chloe." "I know," Chloe whispered. "Don't say anything." Paige turned toward them again, voice sharp to hide her fear. What's in that bag?" "Books," Chloe said evenly, "and something that used to listen." Paige's eyes narrowed. "You're not clever, sweetheart. You're just scared." "Maybe," Chloe replied, "but the sky's not." The loudspeaker crackled overhead. A voice, calm and official, filled the terminal. "Attention passengers. Effective immediately, all Zenith jet operations are under ethics review. Flights are grounded pending federal clearance. Please remain where you are." The announcement was repeated in Korean, Japanese, and English. Celine clutched her sister's arm. "It's really happening." Chloe looked toward the windows where planes sat idle under the bright morning sun. "It's not revenge," she said quietly. "It's response." Paige's hands shook as she reached for her phone. It buzzed before she could dial. A message appeared from Zenith Jet headquarters. "All crew report to nearest federal liaison. Compliance mandatory. Do not engage media." Her stomach dropped. "No," she whispered. "No, no, no." The gate agent stepped back from his desk, headset slipping. "Ms. Rutherford," he said softly, "they're asking for you." "For what?" He didn't answer. In the corner, the triplets sat down together on the bench where Paige had told them to wait earlier. It didn't feel like punishment anymore. It felt like a front-row seat to a truth unspooling in real time. Clara leaned her head on Chloe's shoulder. Dad always said the system sees everything. Chloe nodded. Yeah, he just didn't say when it would start caring. Outside, the sound of turbines fading to silence rippled through the runways. A whole fleet of planes stopped mid-sequence, doors sealed, engines cooling, as if the sky itself had folded its arms. Paige stood alone near the glass, watching the reflection of the three girls in the window. For the first time, her own reflection didn't look like authority. It looked like guilt. She turned to say something, to explain, to justify. But Chloe's gaze met hers, steady, calm, unblinking. It wasn't anger in the girl's eyes. It was something worse for Paige, recognition, the same kind a mirror gives when it finally decides to tell the truth. For a full minute, no one spoke. The airport was still awake, but it wasn't alive. The hum of the air conditioning had stopped. The boarding signs had gone gray. Even the music, the generic instrumental that looped through every terminal in the world, had cut off mid-note. It wasn't chaos. It was stranger than that. It was silence that knew. Paige Rutherford stood in the middle of Gate 19, her hands trembling just enough to make the plastic boarding cards in her grip rattle. She stared at the monitors overhead, watching one word repeat on every screen. Hold. She tried to laugh. You're kidding me, she said too loudly. This can't be happening because of... She stopped herself before saying them. The passengers behind her started whispering. The man with the designer jacket murmured to his wife, They said 9 airports are frozen. 9. His wife frowned. All Zenith jet routes? Yeah. The newsfeed says, ethics suspension under Horizon Protocol. What does that even mean? A few people started filming. Paige turned sharply, hands raised. Put those away, she snapped. You don't film crew without permission. Her voice echoed through the unnatural quiet. No one lowered their phones. At the center of it all, the three sisters sat shoulder to shoulder on the plastic bench, legs still, eyes wide. Celine's whisper broke the hush. Chloe, what's happening? Chloe's reply was quiet enough that only her sisters could hear. 5 minutes. Clara frowned. 5 minutes until what? Chloe didn't answer, because she didn't know either. She just knew something had started. A process too big to stop and too moral to ignore. Outside the window, the first signs appeared. The jet bridge lights blinked red. The engines on the parked plane wound down with a soft metallic sigh. Then the intercom crackled again. This time thinner, more static between words. Attention! All terminals. Stand by under Horizon Command. Repeat, Horizon Command. The agent's headset buzzed with overlapping voices, commands, verifications, confusion. He stood frozen, one hand pressed to his earpiece. Then, in a whisper that trembled just enough to betray fear, he said, It's everywhere. Japan, Singapore, Sydney. The whole fleet's grounded. Paige spun toward him. That's impossible. He didn't argue. He didn't even look at her. He just said, They said it was triggered by a dependent badge. Paige's jaw dropped. A what? He swallowed. A child security tag registered under Horizon. They're calling it a federal activation. She blinked, the words bouncing around inside her skull. You're saying, he met her eyes, that kid's badge did this. Paige turned toward Chloe. You? She whispered, disbelieving. You did this? Chloe looked up. Her eyes weren't angry. They were calm. Too calm. I didn't do anything, ma'am. Celine added softly. It's doing it by itself. The crowd murmured again. Phones filming, people whispering. Someone muttered, that's her. That's the kid. In the command center across the city, screens glowed with cascading data. Confirm cross-link to FAA servers, one technician ordered. Confirmed. 9 airports suspended. Auto-trigger authorized at Incheon. Who's the registered dependent? Brooks family clearance. A woman in uniform looked up. Wait, did you say Brooks? The technician nodded. Yes, ma'am. Brooks, Charlotte. No, correction. Han Charlotte. Dual registration. The woman exhaled. She's part of the Horizon Founders Test Group. That's a prototype badge. It's not supposed to trigger without operator consent. Apparently, the technician said. It didn't ask for one. Back at gate 19, the seconds dragged like hours. Every person in the terminal could feel it, the invisible current of something bigger than them unfolding just out of reach. Paige took a step toward the girls. Look, she said, voice brittle. Whatever this is, it's a mistake. You don't understand how serious. Celine flinched when Paige moved closer, and the reaction made the onlookers tense. A man near the gate called out, Ma'am, maybe give them space. Paige turned on him, furious. You don't know what's happening. No, he said quietly, but I saw what happened before. She froze. The truth was that everyone had seen it. The slap, the trembling children, the stunned silence afterward. And now, with every screen in the airport flickering red, they knew it wasn't going away. A vibration hummed through the floor as the PA system clicked back to life. The voice this time was lower, slower, deliberate. Gray flag protocol engaged. Horizon ethics review in progress. Zenith jet operations suspended at 9 airports. Passengers remain seated. All staff report to compliance officers. You could have heard a heartbeat drop. Then the murmurs started. Waves of disbelief. 9 airports? Ethics review? What's a gray flag? Paige's face drained of color. 9 airports, she whispered. Oh my God. Chloe's gaze followed the people filming her, then the gate agents shaking hands, then Paige's unraveling posture. She didn't feel triumph. She felt the strange weight of justice that wasn't hers to control. This isn't about me, she murmured. Clara leaned close. Then who? The system, Chloe said simply. It remembered. 5 minutes passed. 5 minutes of silence so pure it felt sacred. In that stillness, you could feel the scale of consequence moving. Slow, deliberate, irreversible. Somewhere beyond the glass, the roar of jet engines was gone. A bird flew past, unnoticed. A small child asked her mother why the lights had stopped blinking. Chloe sat perfectly straight, her hand folded in her lap, her sisters beside her. Paige stood a few feet away, rigid, shaking, mascara running down one side of her face. In another part of the terminal, a journalist whispered into his mic, This is Gate 19 at Incheon International. For the first time in history, an entire airline has been frozen by an automated ethics system. Sources say the trigger came from a child's badge, one registered to a family within the Horizon safety network. His producer hissed, Keep rolling. The announcement came once more, softer this time, like a benediction. All operations under review. Passenger dignity is non-negotiable. Please remain calm. Paige looked around, desperate for control, for logic, for a way back to the world where she still had authority. But that world had ended exactly 5 minutes ago. Chloe finally stood. Her sisters followed. She looked at Paige, her voice barely above a whisper. You told us to step aside. Now the world has. Paige blinked, stunned. What are you talking about? But Chloe didn't explain. She just turned toward the window, watching the planes grounded in their silver rows like giants made to kneel. 5 minutes earlier, the world had ignored 3 little girls in first class. Now, it couldn't look away. It started with the headlines. By the time the sun set over Seoul, every screen in the terminal had turned into a mirror reflecting one event. Gate 19. Within hours, a grainy clip surfaced online. Paige Rutherford's hand raised mid-motion, the sharp echo of contact, and 3 small faces frozen in disbelief. Someone had added captions, When Silence Fights Back. By morning, it had 40 million views. At Zenith Jet headquarters, the boardroom smelled like expensive panic. Coffee gone cold, shirts clinging to sweat, executives whispering numbers that didn't sound real anymore. On the wall, a projection showed 9 red dots blinking across a map of the Pacific. 9 airports, said the CFO, rubbing his temples. All our operations frozen under gray flag. The CEO didn't look up. His tie was loosened, his voice measured but cracked at the edges. How long? 7 hours since the first trigger. Cost? The CFO hesitated. 9.3 million in immediate losses, 6.7 in delayed partnerships, and, he paused, the federal ethics audit goes live in 30 minutes. No one spoke after that. A junior executive scrolled through a social feed projected onto the wall. The hashtags were already trending worldwide. Gate 19, Sky Justice #Horizon Protocol. Dignity is policy. What's the sentiment analysis? The CEO asked quietly. The young analyst swallowed. 89% negative, sir. Negative toward who? The analyst hesitated, then said, us. At the airport, news crews had gathered outside the security cordon. Reporters whispered words like federal, classified, AI override. Inside Gate 19, the crowd was thinning, but no one had really left. Even those who'd been rebooked lingered near the windows, waiting to see what would happen next. Paige sat in a metal chair by the wall, her airline badge turned face down on the lanyard. Her hands trembled in her lap. She had spent the last hour trying to convince herself it was all an overreaction, that things like this blew over once someone higher up took charge. But deep down, she knew that no supervisor could out-talk a system that had already judged. The triplets were gone now, escorted quietly to a private lounge by airport security. Gentle, respectful, almost reverent. Chloe had looked back once. Just once. Her eyes steady, as if memorizing the scene she'd leave behind. The officer leading them had whispered to another agent. The Horizon badge triggered it. Full code sequence. It's verified. Paige had overheard those words. They wouldn't stop replaying in her head. Somewhere above the Pacific, an encrypted line connected the FAA Ethics Division, Homeland Security, and Horizon Defense Analytics. Status on Zenith Jet? A deep voice asked. Still grounded across 7 nations, came the reply. No flights permitted to enter or leave protected corridors. Good. Keep it that way until the audit concludes. A pause. And the children? Under federal care, awaiting parental contact. No media access granted. Perfect. Let the story speak for itself. Back in Seoul, the Horizon Command Center was chaos disguised as order. Dozens of monitors streamed live feeds. Airports, terminals, offices, each with a flashing red icon in the corner. Gray flag active. Director Ji-Yeon Han stood in front of the primary display, her jaw set, her expression unreadable. Confirmed that all affected flights belong solely to Zenith Jet. Confirmed, ma'am. No civilian traffic impacted. Good. She exhaled slowly, then added, begin the statement. Her communications officer nodded. A press release began scrolling across international news channels within minutes. Breaking. Horizon Ethics System activated after verified child assault incident at Incheon International. 9 airports have suspended Zenith Jet operations pending investigation. Estimated losses exceed $9 million. Officials confirmed the trigger was lawful and within Horizon parameters. The world read those words, and for the first time in history, no one could argue with them, because the system itself had decided. In the lounge, Chloe sat quietly beside her sisters, a blanket around her shoulders. The officer who'd escorted them offered water, cookies, and silence. Celine asked in a small voice, "Are we in trouble?" Chloe shook her head. "No, they are." Clara stared at her. "The lady?" Chloe hesitated, then nodded. "Her, and everyone who let her be like that." Outside, a TV mounted on the wall played a news broadcast. Paige Rutherford's photo appeared beside the Zenith Jet logo. The caption read, "Senior attendant suspended amid global ethics scandal." Celine turned her face into the blanket. "I don't like that picture." Chloe didn't look away. "It's not about her picture," she said softly. "It's about the reflection." At headquarters, Paige's name was already being scrubbed from internal systems. Her employee login returned access denied. Her crew app displayed one sentence in red. Status: under federal ethics review. Do not assign flights. Her phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't corporate. It was personal. A text from her sister. Paige, is it true? She didn't reply. There were no words left that could survive the truth. By late afternoon, the damage was no longer about money. It was moral. Stockholders pulled out. The press dubbed it the day the sky stopped. Federal regulators announced an emergency summit. Airlines worldwide scrambled to review their passenger conduct training. In London, the Aviation Standards Commission issued a statement. Passenger dignity violations will now constitute Class A breaches under international law. And in Washington, the FAA spokesperson added, when machines enforce ethics faster than humans, it's time we catch up. That evening, as twilight brushed the runway in shades of orange and steel, Gate 19 was empty again. Only cleaning staff moved between the rows of chairs. The silence had returned, but it wasn't the same silence as before. It was cleaner, sharper, like the world had exhaled and something dark had finally left the air. Paige walked past the window, escorted by 2 federal officers. Her face was pale, her expression unreadable. Through the glass, she saw the reflection of the sky, wide, endless, and unbothered. You're lucky, one of the officers said quietly. If that badge hadn't stopped you, the cameras would have. Paige didn't answer. She didn't need to. Somewhere deep down, she knew this wasn't luck. It was consequence. At that same moment, across the world, Chloe Hahn looked out another window, this one from a small room in the ethics wing of the Horizon Center. She watched the planes parked in rows, grounded but gleaming under the fading light. Celine yawned beside her. Are they still not flying? No, Chloe said. Not until they remember why they do. Clara leaned on her shoulder. Will they remember? Chloe looked up, the faintest smile ghosting her face. The sky always remembers. Outside, the last flight number on the board flickered gray, then turned off completely. The system rested. For the first time in a long time, it didn't feel like silence. It felt like peace. By sunrise, the story had crossed every border. It wasn't just trending, it was everywhere. From airport lounges in New York to cafe TVs in Manila, 3 words kept repeating across screens, news feeds, and headlines. The sky watched back. The video from Gate 19 had become the most shared clip of the year. The slap, the silence, the lights dimming, all captured from 3 different angles, stitched together by strangers online who didn't even know the girls' names. It wasn't about outrage anymore. It was about reflection. In a world used to noise, this story was spreading because of what it didn't have. No screaming, no chaos. Just a calm system doing what people should have done. At a morning press conference, Minister Hahn, the girl's father, stood behind a row of microphones. His voice was steady, but his eyes carried the fatigue of a man who'd seen the cost of silence too many times. Let me be clear, he said, reading from no notes. The system did not malfunction. It fulfilled its purpose. A reporter shouted, Minister Hahn, did your children cause this shutdown? He met the question head on. My children didn't shut down an airline, he said. An airline shut itself down when it failed to treat dignity as policy. The room fell silent. No one typed for a few seconds. No one even blinked. He continued, his tone quieter but heavier. The Horizon AI doesn't seek punishment. It seeks reflection. That was always its purpose, to make sure empathy doesn't have to wait for apology. Behind him, a large display showed the Horizon logo, a wing-shaped arc surrounding a single word, trust. Across the ocean in Washington, D.C., a Senate subcommittee called an emergency meeting. Every major airline representative was there, along with Horizon defense executives and FAA officials. The air in the chamber was heavy with ego and discomfort. An FAA administrator adjusted his microphone. What we witnessed at Gate 19 was a historic first, a system enforcing ethics faster than humans could react. A senator leaned forward. You're saying artificial intelligence made a moral decision? The administrator nodded. It didn't replace us. It reminded us. A murmur spread through the room. The CEO of Zenith Jet shifted in his seat. With respect, sir, we've lost $9 million in revenue and reputation in 24 hours. You're treating this like progress. The FAA official turned toward him, eyes calm but cutting. When progress hurts, it usually means it's working. The senator's next words sealed it into history. Effective immediately, all major U.S. carriers will be required to adopt Horizon's Passenger Dignity Protocol. The vote passed 7-0. Meanwhile, in a quiet office inside Horizon Command Seoul, Director Ji-Eun Han watched the coverage in silence. Her phone buzzed every 10 seconds. Messages from ministers, international aviation boards, journalists begging for comment. She ignored all of them. Instead, she looked at a photo on her desk. 3 little girls, smiling under a cherry blossom tree in matching uniforms. Her niece, Chloe, stood in the center, saluting. Ji-Eun whispered to the empty room, "You did exactly what it was built for." Her assistant knocked softly. "Ma'am, the London Aviation Ethics Council just issued a statement. They're calling it the Horizon Precedent." Ji-Eun smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe now people will stop calling it a machine." At the same moment, in a small interview room inside Incheon's Federal Terminal, Paige Rutherford sat across from 2 investigators. The walls were bare. A single camera blinked red in the corner. One of the investigators slid a tablet across the table. On the screen, the viral video played silently, her own hand mid-swing, the child's head turning from the impact, the pause that followed. Paige's eyes filled, but not with tears, just exhaustion. "I didn't think," she whispered. "I thought she was pretending." The investigator leaned back. "You didn't ask. You assumed." Paige nodded. "I've worked 18 years. I thought I could tell who belongs." "And now?" Her voice cracked. "Now, I'm not sure I belong anywhere." He didn't answer. He just turned the tablet around, pressed pause, and said, "That's what reform looks like. The world stops until we decide who we really are." In a Tokyo newsroom, a journalist wrote his editorial slowly, the way people write when they know their words might outlive the news cycle. Gate 19 wasn't about artificial intelligence or airline policy. It was about accountability. For years, passengers have trusted that systems protect them. But maybe it's time we trust systems that learn from us instead. Because when a child's silence speaks louder than a corporation's excuses, the world finally starts listening. He paused, reading it once more before filing it. It didn't need edits. Truth never does. By evening, Zenith Jet's CEO appeared on live television, looking 20 years older than the day before. He began with the sentence his lawyers told him not to say. "I am sorry," he continued. "No system failed us. People did. We will cooperate fully with the Horizon Review and accept any sanction. To the Han family, your children reminded us that the skies don't belong to companies. They belong to conscience." When he finished, the broadcast went silent for 3 seconds before the anchor spoke again. Those 3 seconds felt like the world taking a breath. At home, in a quiet apartment overlooking the Han River, Chloe sat on her bed, her sisters beside her. The badge lay on the nightstand, the faint Horizon emblem catching the moonlight. Celine brushed her fingers over it. "Will it light up again?" Chloe shook her head. "It doesn't need to." Clara asked, "Are you scared it'll happen again?" Chloe smiled, a small, knowing smile. "If it does, it means the world's still paying attention." Outside, a jet flew overhead. Not Zenith Jet, not Horizon. Just a plane, ordinary and bright against the night sky. But for the first time in a long time, it sounded different. Softer, honest. The world hadn't ended at Gate 19. It had started watching. And once the sky learns how to see, it never forgets. The room was too bright to hide in. Fluorescent light hummed overhead, white and unforgiving. The air smelled like disinfectant and paper, clean, controlled, emotionless. Paige Rutherford sat in the center, hands clasped tightly in her lap. Across from her, 2 investigators from the Federal Aviation Ethics Division studied her without speaking. Behind them, a small camera blinked its red dot, recording everything. The silence, the twitch of her fingers, the way her shoulders refused to drop. When the older investigator finally spoke, his voice wasn't sharp. It was the kind of calm that made excuses sound louder. "Ms. Rutherford," he said, "you understand this interview is being documented as part of the gray flag inquiry?" Paige nodded. "Yes." Her voice cracked, thin from sleeplessness. "Do you know why you're here?" She hesitated. "Because I lost control." The younger investigator shook his head slightly. "No. You're here because you thought you had it." Paige swallowed. "I thought they were pretending." The man leaned forward. "Pretending what?" "Pretending to belong." The words fell out before she could shape them into something softer. She wished she could pull them back, but the air in the room didn't allow for revision. The younger investigator glanced at the tablet in front of him. The paused video glowed between them. Paige's hand raised mid-motion, 3 small girls flinching, the echo of a slap that had traveled around the world. "Is this you?" he asked. Paige nodded once, her eyes fixed on the table. "Yes." "And this?" He pressed play, the screen showing her lips moving. "Step aside." She winced. "Yes." The older investigator paused the clip and looked at her. "Why did you say that?" Paige rubbed her palms together until they burned. "Because that's what we were trained to say when there's confusion at the gate." "Trained to say," he repeated slowly. "Or used to saying." Paige's throat tightened. "Used to." The silence that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was true. In another building, on another floor, Minister Hahn stood behind a glass panel, watching the live feed. He didn't enjoy it. He didn't even want to be there. But this was procedure. His voice over the comm was measured, professional, but there was something underneath it, something personal. "She has the right to legal representation," he said. "She waived it," one of the agents replied. "She said she wanted to speak." Hahn nodded slowly. "Then let her." He knew this wasn't about vengeance. The system wasn't designed to punish, it was designed to teach. Back in the room, Paige stared at her reflection in the mirrored glass. She could feel someone watching. She wondered if it was him, the man from the news, the one with the calm voice who'd said his children hadn't shut down an airline, only forced it to face itself. "I've worked flights for 17 years, she said suddenly, the words spilling out. "You start to think you can tell who belongs, who matters, who's trouble. It's instinct. It's how you stay ahead." The younger investigator nodded. "And where does that instinct come from?" Paige blinked, caught off guard. "Experience." "No," he said softly. "It comes from habits you stopped questioning." Her lips parted, but no words came. The older investigator leaned back, his gaze steady. "You're not the first, Ms. Rutherford. The system doesn't wake up for mistakes. It wakes up for patterns." Paige frowned. "Patterns?" He turned the tablet toward her again. The feed changed. Different airports, different dates. Faces of attendants, passengers, incidents. People spoken to harshly, turned away, belittled. "The Horizon system monitors behavioral ethics," he said. "It detected a string of violations linked to your crew code over 2 years. Small ones. Comments, tone, discretionary seat reassignments." Paige's stomach dropped. "You were watching me?" "We weren't," he said quietly. "The system was. You just gave it enough data to learn the pattern." She felt sick. Her voice shook. "I didn't mean harm. I just didn't notice," he finished. The words hung there, heavy as guilt. For a long moment, no one spoke. The hum of the lights filled the silence like a heartbeat. Finally, Paige asked, "What happens now?" The older investigator folded his hands. You'll face an ethics board. They'll determine if you're fit to hold federal certification. But I'll be honest, this isn't about your job anymore. She frowned. Then what is it about? He studied her. Whether you understand why the world needed to stop for you to see yourself. Paige's eyes filled. They were just kids, she whispered. He nodded once. Exactly. In another room, Chloe Hahn sat with her sisters, watching the same feed on a muted monitor. She didn't look satisfied. She looked tired. Older, somehow. Celine leaned forward. Are they yelling at her? Chloe shook her head. No, they're letting her hear herself. Clara frowned. Is that better? Chloe thought for a moment. Sometimes silence is louder than yelling. Their aunt, Director Ji-eun Han, stood in the doorway, listening. Your father said something like that once, she murmured. Chloe looked up. Did he mean it? Ji-eun smiled faintly. He built an entire system around it. Back in the room, the interview was ending. Paige sat quietly as the investigator stood. The older one hesitated before leaving and said, The system logged one more note, Ms. Rutherford. She looked up, wary. What kind of note? He read from his screen. Subject showed signs of remorse. Emotional alignment detected. Gray flag sequence complete. What does that mean? She asked. He paused at the door. It means the system believes you learned something. Whether the world forgives you, well, that's still a human decision. When the door closed, Paige let out a sound she didn't recognize. A half sob, half laugh. Not relief, not despair. Just the sound of a person realizing that the sky had been watching long before the cameras ever did. Outside, Minister Han watched the lights on the monitor dim. The system had gone back to standby. No noise, no punishment, just quiet. He whispered, almost to himself. The goal was never revenge. It was recognition. And somewhere deep inside the network, the horizon badge in Chloe's room pulsed once, faint and fleeting, as if it agreed. The world had stopped shouting. For the first time in weeks, airports ran on schedule again. Flights lifted off. Gates reopened. The chaos had turned into something else, an echo that lingered not in noise, but in policy. Screens across terminals still carried the message, dignity is not optional. It wasn't just a slogan anymore. It was law. At the International Ethics Summit in Washington, rows of officials, airline executives, and journalists filled the hall. Banners of the newly adopted Horizon Passenger Protocol hung behind the podium. The chatter was low but charged. Cameras clicked. The hum of translation headsets layered over the sound of typing fingers. When Minister Han walked to the microphone, the room went still. He wasn't there as a politician today. He was there as a father, and the architect of a system that had forced the world to look at itself. He began softly, no notes in his hand, only a folded paper badge resting on the podium. 3 weeks ago, he said, a flight attendant raised her hand against a child, and for the first time in history, it wasn't a child who cried. It was the system that answered. He let that hang there, just long enough for the silence to grow heavy. This protocol isn't about punishing airlines, he continued. It's about protecting what we all forget when we chase efficiency. Dignity. The quiet, invisible kind that never makes headlines until it's taken away. He looked out over the crowd, scanning faces. Some ashamed, some defiant, most thoughtful. The girls who stood still at Gate 19 didn't start a revolution, he said. They reminded one that had been waiting to happen. Outside the summit, crowds gathered behind barriers, holding signs that read, "Respect flies higher," and "Never Gate 19 again." A woman in a pilot's uniform handed out ribbons. For every passenger who was told they didn't belong, she said to a reporter. That ends now. On a nearby screen, footage rolled from inside the summit. The FAA chairwoman spoke next. In partnership with Horizon Defense, we've implemented an international ethics ledger, tracking dignity compliance in real time. Violations won't disappear in silence anymore. They'll leave a trail. Reporters typed furiously. One headline flashed within minutes. Horizon Ledger goes live. The skies just got transparent. Meanwhile, in a quieter corner of the world, Paige Rutherford sat on a park bench overlooking the Potomac. She had declined every interview. Her name was already etched into the scandal. She didn't need another spotlight. Her termination papers lay folded inside her bag, but that wasn't what she kept thinking about. It was the note that came with them, written by hand, not typed. Accountability isn't the end. It's the first real flight, DH. She didn't know if Minister Hahn had written it himself, but she liked to think he had. A little girl nearby was feeding pigeons. Paige watched as a group of tourists brushed past her without seeing her, nearly knocking the bread from her hand. The girl didn't cry. She just looked up, quietly disappointed. Paige stood, walked over, and crouched down. "Here," she said softly, gathering the crumbs and placing them back in the girl's palm. The girl smiled, small but real. "Thank you." Paige nodded. "No, sweetheart. Thank you." And for the first time since the incident, she didn't feel like an outcast. She just felt human. At that same moment, Chloe Hahn was walking through her school hallway in Seoul, her uniform crisp, her badge locked away at home. Most kids had stopped whispering now. The curiosity had faded into respect, the quiet kind. A teacher stopped her before class. "Chloe, you've been invited to speak at the Global Youth Forum next month," she said. "They want to hear your perspective on empathy and technology." Chloe blinked. "I'm not a speaker." The teacher smiled. "You weren't a hero either, until you were." Chloe thought about it all day. The badge, the silence, the way the world had paused just because she didn't back down. And she realized something that her father had once told her, but she hadn't understood until now. Sometimes the smallest voice rewrites the loudest system. Back in Washington, the summit was winding down. Delegates shook hands. Cameras clicked again. A draft of the Passenger Ethics Accord was being passed around for final signatures. Minister Hahn placed his pen on the paper, paused, and said into the microphone, "This isn't a victory. It's a correction. The real test isn't how fast the world changes. It's whether we stay changed when no one's watching." The audience stood. It wasn't applause in the noisy sense. It was that slow, quiet standing reserved for respect, not spectacle. Outside, a journalist turned to her cameraman. "You ever notice how these stories end quieter than they start?" He nodded. That's why they last. That night, Chloe sat by the window of her apartment. The city lights blinked below, and the faint hum of planes traced lines across the dark sky. Celine and Clara had fallen asleep beside her, their heads resting against her shoulders. On the TV in the background, the news anchor said, "The Passenger Ethics Accord has now been signed by 18 nations, with more expected to follow." Chloe muted it and whispered, "Good." Her father entered quietly, still in uniform. "You couldn't sleep either?" She shook her head. "I just keep thinking, what if the system never needed to wake up at all?" Hans smiled gently. "Then maybe we'd have learned the hard way. The world doesn't need machines to be better, Chloe. It needs reminders." She looked up. "Are we still being watched?" He chuckled softly. "Always, but not by the sky this time. By each other." Down below, a plane lifted into the air. Its engines whispered through the night. Not roaring, but steady, like an apology carried on wind. And for the first time since Gate 19, the world didn't feel heavy anymore. It felt lighter, because silence, when earned, isn't absence. It's peace. The ballroom shimmered with glass and light. Flags from 43 nations lined the stage, their colors mirrored in the polished marble floor. Every seat was filled. Executives, government ministers, students, and journalists from every continent. It wasn't a corporate summit. It wasn't even about aviation anymore. It was the Global Passenger Ethics Forum, and it existed because one quiet moment at Gate 19 had rewritten how the world defined respect. The lights dimmed. A voice echoed across the hall. Please welcome Miss Chloe Hahn." The applause began soft, then spread like a tide. Steady, respectful, not loud. Chloe walked onto the stage, small in stature but perfectly composed. The navy dress she wore had a single silver pin at the collar, the same shape as her old Horizon badge, but without the circuitry. Just a symbol now. She adjusted the microphone, her hand steady. "Thank you," she said, her voice calm but clear. "I'm not here to talk about technology. I'm here to talk about people." The hall went still. Cameras flashed, then stilled again. When I was told I couldn't sit in a seat I'd been given, I didn't know I was starting anything. I didn't even speak much that day. The system did most of the talking. But it wasn't about power. It was about pause, the kind that makes people look at what they've stopped seeing. She glanced down at her prepared notes, then closed them. "I don't need this," she said softly. "I learned that dignity isn't a luxury for the few. It's not a seat class or a policy tier. It's what holds the sky up." A woman in the audience, an airline executive from Canada, leaned forward. Her pen stopped moving. Chloe's tone wasn't political. It was something deeper. "When the system shut down those airports," Chloe continued, "people called it overreaction. Some said it was revenge. But revenge stories never last. Justice does." A ripple of emotion moved through the hall. The phrase hung there, soft, deliberate, unforgettable. She took a breath. "My brother used to tell me, courage isn't the loud part. It's what you keep doing after the noise. I think that's what this is about. Not slapping back, but standing still until truth walks in." In the front row, Minister Hahn watched his daughter with quiet pride. He didn't look like a politician now. He looked like a father who had just realized that his greatest work wasn't the system he'd built, but the child who had shown the world how to use it. Beside him, Director Ji-Yun Han wiped her eyes discreetly. A BBC journalist whispered to his cameraman, "She's 11, right?" "Yeah," the cameraman murmured. "But she's talking like someone who's seen history," Chloe continued, voice growing warmer now. "When people saw the video, they saw a child being struck. But I want you to see something else. The moment after the slap, when no one spoke. That silence wasn't weakness. It was reflection. And the world needed that reflection more than another argument." She paused again. "When the lights went out in those airports, they didn't go out to punish anyone. They went out to remind us that empathy can't be delayed until it's convenient." A few people stood without realizing it. Others simply nodded, eyes glossy. When Chloe stepped away from the microphone, the applause rose. Not thunderous, but sustained. The kind of applause that feels like breathing, not cheering. Minister Han joined her on stage, his expression soft but resolute. He placed a hand on her shoulder. "You taught them what I couldn't," he whispered. She looked up. "You built it, I just turned it on." He smiled. "And you made the world listen." Later, during the closing panel, the moderator read the results of the international vote. The Passenger Ethics Accord has been signed by 27 nations. Each will implement quarterly dignity compliance audits. The Horizon Protocol is now a permanent standard under the International Aviation Ethics Council. Applause again, this time accompanied by relief, by something that felt like healing. The camera panned across the delegates, pausing briefly on Paige Rutherford, seated quietly in the back. She wasn't there as staff. She'd been invited as a consultant for empathy training, one of the first hired under the Accord's rehabilitation program. When her eyes met Chloe's across the hall, Chloe didn't look away. She nodded. Just once. Paige nodded back. No words, no spectacle. Just recognition. That was enough. Outside, news outlets flooded the courtyard. Global Accord signed after Gate 19 incident. Dignity enters policy books. The quietest revolution in aviation. A reporter asked Minister Han what he thought would change next. He replied, "Airlines used to compete for luxury. Now they'll compete for integrity. That's a better race." That evening, Chloe stood on the hotel balcony overlooking the city. Planes streaked across the sky, their lights like tiny promises. Her aunt joined her, holding 2 mugs of cocoa. "You know," Ji-un said. You didn't just fix an airline. You changed how the world looks up. Chloe smiled faintly. Then maybe it'll stop looking down so often. They stood in silence for a while, listening to the faint hum of air traffic, restored but reformed. Ji-un glanced at her. Do you miss the badge? Chloe shook her head. No, it did what it was meant to do. It reminded people to act before systems have to. In that moment, a single plane passed directly overhead. Its underbelly reflected the city's light, shimmering like a quiet salute. Somewhere inside that plane, a flight attendant smiled at a passenger boarding late, helped an elderly man lift his bag, and meant it. The kind of small kindness the world had stopped noticing, until a child taught it how again. The world didn't end at Gate 19, it just changed direction. Weeks after the Global Passenger Ethics Forum, the sky looked different, not because the planes flew any slower or the clouds shifted shape, but because people had started looking up again, with awareness instead of assumption. Every terminal now carried a small silver plaque near the boarding gates. It didn't name a company or a country, just a single line. Dignity is not optional, it's policy. At Incheon International, Chloe Han stood by that plaque one late afternoon, her travel bag at her feet, ticket in hand. Her first solo flight. No cameras, no press, no speeches. Just her. Her sisters waving from behind the glass, and her father beside her. You nervous? Minister Han asked, straightening her collar the way fathers always do, no matter how grown their children think they are. Chloe smiled faintly. Not really, just thinking. About? She looked out toward the runway. How one slap grounded the world, and how one pause fixed it. He exhaled quietly. It didn't fix everything, Chloe, but it reminded people that silence isn't the absence of action, it's the start of it. She nodded. I know. He handed her a small envelope. This came from the ethics division. Inside was a certificate embossed with the Horizon insignia. Recognition of ethical initiative, civilian rank. Underneath, in smaller text, for embodying the principle of silent strength in the pursuit of systemic justice. Chloe traced her name with her thumb. I didn't think they gave awards for doing the right thing. Her father smiled. They don't. They give them to remind others what it looks like. Across the ocean, a classroom in Boston watched the same story unfold on their morning news projector. The teacher paused the clip of Chloe's forum speech. Class, she said, what's the difference between punishment and reform? A hand shot up. Punishment makes you scared. Reform makes you think. The teacher smiled. Exactly. For once, the story of a child in first class wasn't about luxury or scandal. It was part of a civics lesson. Meanwhile, at Zenith Jet headquarters, the once glass and steel pride of the aviation world had changed too. The company now operated under full federal ethics supervision. The boardroom that used to smell of ego now smelled faintly of coffee and humility. Paige Rutherford sat on the opposite side of the same conference table she had once been too nervous to approach. She was no longer a flight attendant. She was now the Human Relations Ethics Liaison, a position she'd helped write into existence. Crew empathy training is complete across all bases, her assistant reported. Paige nodded. Good. Let's make it standard, not seasonal. She paused at the window, watching a Zenith jet plane taxiing toward takeoff. People think grounding was the punishment, she said softly. It wasn't. Staying grounded until we learn is the lesson. Her assistant hesitated. Do you ever think they'll forgive us? Paige turned, the same quiet steadiness Chloe had once shown now in her own voice. Maybe, but forgiveness isn't the goal. Change is. Back in Seoul, the Han family's apartment was peaceful again. Celine and Clara were arguing over homework. The sound of a TV played softly in the background. The news anchor mentioned something about Horizon Ethics expanding into maritime transport. Ji-un Han, Chloe's aunt, leaned on the balcony rail beside her niece. So, she said, how does it feel being the youngest ethics consultant in Asia? Chloe laughed softly. Weird. Like I pressed a button that the world should have pressed years ago. Ji-un nodded. Maybe it took a child to remind grown-ups that the system wasn't broken. It was asleep. They watched a jet lift off, its lights blinking against the evening sky. For a moment, it looked like a slow heartbeat. Later that night, Chloe opened her drawer and took out the badge. The same one that had once turned the world red with protocol alerts. It no longer pulsed. The system had been deactivated, replaced by new legislation. But she kept it anyway. She turned it over in her hand, whispering, "You did your job." Then she placed it inside a wooden box labeled Adam's Things. Her brother's medals rested beside it, bronze, silver, and the folded flag from his memorial. She lingered a moment, brushing her fingers along the edges of the flag. "I hope you saw all of it," she murmured. The world finally remembered. In London, a reporter finished editing a feature titled "The Sky That Learned to Listen." His closing paragraph read, "What began as a single act of cruelty became a chain of accountability stretching across continents. It taught us that silence is not surrender. It's observation, calibration, correction. And in a rare moment in human history, technology didn't divide us. It held a mirror." He paused, rereading it, then added one last line. "The sky remembers, because we finally made it worth remembering." On the other side of the world, Chloe's flight cruised through thin clouds, the hum of the engine steady and calm. The new crew moved gracefully through the cabin. Every gesture was quiet, intentional, kind. When the attendant stopped beside her seat, she smiled, not the scripted kind, but the human one. "Would you like some tea, Miss Han?" Chloe looked up. "Yes, thank you." The attendant poured carefully, setting the cup on the tray without a word. Their eyes met for a second. No guilt, no hierarchy, just shared understanding. As the plane ascended above the last trace of city light, Chloe leaned against the window, watching the endless blue beyond. The world had shouted. Then it had paused. Now it was listening. And for the first time since that day at Gate 19, she could finally rest, knowing that somewhere between silence and justice, the sky had found its voice.